So up next, we'll be uncovering the hidden power of green energy, how software is speeding up renewable deployment and enhancing asset management efficiency. So joining the panel today, we have Patrikas, Feiferas, Taco, Engelaar, Jorgen, Festervoll, Julien, Cristiani, and our moderator of this discussion, Rhea Hamilton, Managing Director of General Atlantic. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Great. Good morning, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here today. I'm extremely excited about the panel that we have in front of us today. We have a mixture here from the investor side, but also the entrepreneur side, and it's a topic that's very important for myself as an investor at General Atlantic. It's about software, and it's about how software can be an incredible enabler for the amount of renewable energy that we're putting into the system, but also how to optimize that energy. And so, without further ado, I'll jump into questions and get the discussion going. I'm going to leave a little bit of time at the end for questions if there's questions in the crowd, so please hold your questions and use that opportunity at the end to ask the panelists here. So maybe starting on the investor side, Patrick, Contrarian Ventures, obviously very active in the market. I think you've got over 28 portfolio companies or made 28 investments. This is Neara, you've seen a lot of activity. Can you just start us off here and talk about the opportunity that you're seeing for software enablement?
Sure. So I personally at least been spending a lot of time in the topic of home electrification, which I think has been top of mind for everyone. And if you look general deals-wise or perspective-wise, there's a lot of companies trying to build from a lot of different perspectives. I think when it comes to enabling assets deployment as well as their management, there's a couple of things that we like, and we think that the problems haven't really existed before, and only now software is being created to address that, but then also certain technical capabilities came online. So for example, one of the things that we are looking is how you streamline the deployment of residential assets, whether it would be EV charge point, whether it would be residential solar, heat pump, or any other. How do you maintain this streamlined experience? How do you get on one platform installer and customer equipment seller? How to make sure they all align, and also solving for the pain point of installers becoming a scarce resource, as we all know, and kind of making them more efficient. So while it hasn't been prevalent 2 to 3 years ago, given the slower deployment, now it's very top of mind for a lot of the people. I think there's also, so that's like if you look into the whole value chain, you deploy the asset. Once you deploy the asset, you operate the asset. I think there's a lot of stuff on the operation side of things. There's new platforms on connecting and aggregating these assets. I think a bunch of these assets have just came online, is one, I think, point. Another point is if you look 10 years ago at homes, the only flexible assets that you can tap into was your gas boiler, which is not ideal, and now you obviously have all these different assets. And I think as much as overused as a buzzword, I think this aggregation of these assets and trying to solve for different and complicated energy markets that we have right now, building a virtual power plant within these all assets and optimizing, I think it's a big challenge some of these companies are trying to solve. And while everyone's talking about AI, I think that's the real use case of AI that we can put to action.
Great. Thank you. And I think we talk a lot about VPP. It's been around for many, many years. People have been working in the industry. So maybe you've just noted it, why do you think, I guess, we're in a different position today than we were maybe 10 years ago for something like a VPP or connectivity to take off?
Yeah, so one thing is, again, I think I like to look at it through perspective of, imagine an energy stool. An energy stool has 3 legs. It has generation, so supply, all the utility scale renewables, solar, wind. You have the consumption, which is demand, which is the end consumer, as well as C&I. And then you have delivery and grid in the middle. Now, what's happening right now is on both generation and supply, the usage and the supply is getting more variable. So introducing more instability in grid, and I think that's a common sense and common knowledge for all of us here. Now, how to solve this whole mess And I think solving this whole mess is going through residential customers. And while all of these millions of assets are working in unmannered way, it creates a lot of problems and a lot of troubles. But equally, if you can aggregate them and work all together into big pool of assets, I think you can unlock a lot of the value and fix all the delivery problems. So I think connectivity layers have also come online. You have all the novel OEMs who are putting stuff into market that as easy as one day of API integration, and then you get all the data. Then again, I think same point is just more assets in the house that flexible that one can tap into. Energy markets, I think on flexibility side, ancillary markets starting to open up and slowly getting harmonized within the Europe. So I think there's a bunch of exciting stuff happening.
Great. Thank you. We're going to come back on a few of the points you touched on there, but I want to get to Julien here from SE Ventures, backed by Schneider Electric, over €1 billion invested, an area you've been very active. Maybe we can just start by some of the opportunities that you're seeing in this area and how software's been enabling renewable energy and also asset optimization.
Yes. So first, hi everyone, and I see that Patrikas is very organized, so like I took my phone to have all my notes in case there's some very technical question. No, like I see some interest in different aspects. Similar, as you're saying, on the residential aspect, what we call the prosumer cycle, and that is basically entering the cycle, but eventually going through the level 3 or 4, which is some type of VPP. So you're eventually connecting your asset, being a 1,5 NPAL with your solar, being a traditional OEM with your batteries or with your EV chargers. So yes, we have invested in this space. We've invested in Ostrom, for example, in Germany. So that's one way to increase the resi, but also the CNI asset, and therefore DR, which then comes with aggregators. So we like this space a lot. Then on the other part, it's about the grid flexibility. So it's connecting up those assets up to the market, up to the DSO, up to the utilities. So we have invested in AutoGrid a while ago, and we are looking at more startups now, especially on what I'll call the marketplaces, and maybe we'll come back to it to be more efficient, basically. So that's on how we call it, so we don't have it here, it's like the deploy, right? On the enhancement, and that's when we'll talk after also, we see two aspects. One is on the optimization. We'll talk about DLR. We have invested in Prisma, for example, in Israel. In this company, we have invested in AI Dash, which is on vegetation management. And finally, we're also looking at all software to improve grid management. Mm-hmm. So for us, it's not two different worlds, but I say it's two worlds of the market. And to come back to your second question that you asked to Patrikas, is we see those worlds not very connected yet. We see some VPPs, but it's very bilateral, local transaction. We believe and we hope that later, this market, like any market in the world, will be more liquid and will be more with much more visibility. And we believe now or very soon is the right time.
Excellent. Okay, we're going to come back to this too, because I think there's a lot of opportunity here. Let's maybe get to the entrepreneurs, where some of the solutions are happening here. Jorgen from Heimdall Power, you actually have a hardware and a software solution that's digitizing the electric grid through your sensor and your software. Can you talk a little bit about the problem that you're trying to solve and some of the barriers that you've come against, and obviously where you're heading?
Absolutely. Thank you for the question and invitation to be here. What's great about being a hardware-enabled software company is that we can actually bring something physical, right? And in a geopolitical space that we're in now, the audience might be excited to know that this exact sensor has actually been in the White House. So I am actually the only guy, apparently, that has ever brought a sensor into the White House. And it was fine. So this sensor basically gives us grid awareness. And it's the first time, I think, to your point, I've been in this industry for 25 years. We talked about solar many years ago. It didn't happen. Virtual power plants, demand management, flexibility. So what has changed? Well, I'll give you one example. In the past decade, the cost of building a mile or a kilometer of overhead line has doubled, more than doubled. The cost of this technology has gone down by 90%, right? So suddenly you actually have a sensor that you can put anywhere in your grid based on cost. The second is communication technology. We can now communicate through satellite, LTE, anywhere in the world. So there is no place that you can't reach. And what this sensor does, so the limiting factor of a power line is the temperature on the line. So think of that as the speed limit. And without having a sensor like that, you don't really know how fast you're going. And when you're driving critical infrastructure, you do not want to speed. And so what this sensor does, as one of the serving, is what's called dynamic line rating, which really is unlocking the capacity between this conservative static rating that we're operating at now and actually utilizing all the capacity. And that typically brings 30 to 40% additional capacity out of existing power lines. So this, one of the features of this is really squeezing out 30 to 40% more capacity of the grid. The second aspect is going into asset health and asset management. So it's looking at icing, it's managing wildfires. Did the fire come to your line or did you start the fire? It's looking at galloping line, blowout that can cause fires. It's electrical fault detection and location. So it's really just giving you visibility in your entire grid. And I think the fact that we now have cloud computing, big data, machine learning, AI, communication technologies, and just the cost of this has gone down is the reason why we now have this technology and technologies, and they are now being deployed.
Fantastic. I want to bring Taco in here as well, because you're also working in this space. Somewhat complementary, but when we talk about if there's some competitive nature
we're good
there.
Friends, yeah.
You know, the company was founded back in 2016. You've created a digital simulation platform, also optimizing the grids. Can you talk a little about your solution and
sure.
how you view the issues?
Hi everyone, good to meet you. My name is Taco Engelaar, representing Neara today. Neara is an Australian company by origin, but active in the US and Europe as well. And essentially what we do is we create digital network models, digital twins. I try to refrain from because there's so many different understandings of what that could mean. But essentially our focus is on the mechanical and physical and engineering aspects of the grid. And we bring that into a digital environment by then providing these insights. So for example, what Jorgen alluded to, collecting that data of the assets and how they're behaving allows us then to, for example, simulate a model with really accurate data as well on our side. Last year, we were one of the top 100 companies called out by Time Magazine. We've modeled about 2 to 3 million kilometers worth of grid globally. And I guess what we do with that is basically provide those insights as well, right? So how do you optimize the assets that you currently have? How do you protect them? So that could look at resilience. We could do storm simulations at scale at the network, understanding the impact if a severe weather or hurricane or a severe storm would hit the network. But also we're looking at network capacity as well. And from our side, that really looks into the physical blockers and barriers into network capacity. We know that the grid is constrained, but sometimes we can actually push the grid much further. There's estimates that the size of the grid and the infrastructure that we currently have needs to be doubled. That's a massive, massive task and will probably take decades to actually finalize. So when we actually go onto that path, what can we do now with these assets that we currently have? And maybe one practical example, and we could go into a little bit more depth. One of our clients in Australia, and I'll have a few more examples if we get to it, we actually were able to model 180,000 kilometers of their network. Obviously, it's extremely difficult to provide insights at such, I guess, length and size of a network. So having a digital copy of that and being able to run different scenario simulations, et cetera, at scale is hugely valuable. Through different simulations, we actually found out that they had double the capacity in their network than they currently thought they did. So Central Energy was actually able to accommodate twice as much renewable energy on their grid as well. Now, I don't have to explain to this room the impact of that, right? Double the amount of renewable energy onto your grid without any actual physical upgrades required, while still operating safely and under their sort of regulatory requirements. So those are the things that we'd like to do. Those are the things that we'd like to show. That's the impact of software. That's currently how we're actually moving the dial. And we're doing that across the world with other clients as well.
So this sounds fantastic, and these solutions sound fantastic. But ultimately, it's still slow to get people moving, right? And there might be some utilities and people in the audience today that aren't moving fast enough and say, how do you be able to go to the market and convince some of these maybe slow movers to take on this journey and start collecting the data? Because I think that's one of the big questions is how do we speed this up?
I don't know where to start on that one. If there's any utilities, close your ears, please. But let me start with this one. I think that's why this conference is really important, bringing together investors as well, right? We need those investors. The sales cycles are extremely long. It's an industry not necessarily prone to change. It's a very cautious industry. Looking at when the grid was built and how it was built, change is not really part of that, right? So technology, cultural change is very important. And I guess how we do that is by, one, having a runway through our investors to be able to sit it out, but then again, also being able to, I guess, leverage the experience that we have globally to now really start accelerating what we do. And I think the impact is really important. So how can you very fast in a small environment show the impact and then start scaling immediately after that? Doesn't mean that the cultural change is not still there and slowing us down, but I guess doing it in a small environment, then scaling up immediately after that, I think is extremely crucial. And having a partner who understands it, because once you've done it for a utility, hopefully in the US or in Europe, you can then say, look what we've done, now let's do it with you guys as well. Let's go on to this journey. And that's still very challenging. That goes far, far easier in the US. I think a more homogeneous market generally. Europe is obviously far more fragmented. If you've done something in France, Germany doesn't necessarily want to believe it in itself. So again, altogether, I think we need to learn from the utilities that are out there to say, hey, we've used this technology, it's really impactful, it really moves the dial, let's now implement it on a larger scale and across, a European level, for example.
I could echo Taco there. I think we typically say that utilities are standing in line to be number 3 to adopt our technology. So nobody wants to be number 1, nobody wants to be number 2. But especially in the US, they don't want to be number 4. Which means that once you get the first 2 bigger contracts, and that's what we're waiting for to get that, and I think we are getting there. And just a very concrete example of the technology adoption, we mount these using autonomous drones. So drones fly them up without any pilots, mounts them on live lines in 10 seconds, right? That's the speed of the deployment that we can do now. We had a US customer, and they were very against doing it with drone. It was high risk. Their whole management team did agree to do one media presentation. So there were news channels and everything. We did one installation. After that installation, they said, hey, could you actually do all of it with drone? Right. So it's also just getting comfortable with this technology and what it does changes the speed. And once they decide to go big. So actually, my worry as a CEO is not that we're not going to succeed, but when the orders start ticking in, that we have the right scale to actually be able to provide thousands of these sensors and the software and the setup in a very quick manner, which is the goal of this technology.
And I think also to your point, one is hard to come by and hard to come in, but once you guys are there, once you have the stuff up in the air, it's you're good, you sort it.
We have 0 turnover on our client base, which I guess shows that. And in fact, we actually grow our revenue and what we do with those clients on an annual basis, which I guess is a testament to what you said, right? Once you've gotten in, which is a very painful, long, and arduous journey, but once you do get there, it's a rewarding journey as well, I guess, in the end of it.
Yeah, I can echo that.
Yeah. And Julien, you had sort of alluded to the fact that maybe there's communication barriers across the different players to connect the points, and maybe that's part of it, is sort of educating and making sure people really understand, where the risks are and where they're not, and where the real enablement is. Can you talk a little bit, maybe from an investor perspective, about maybe what we can do to try to enable, whether it's through marketplaces or different business models to address this?
So in this particular space, as an investor, we pay special attention to 2 topics. Is there a real pain point, mainly for utilities or for consumers? And the startup in this field, do they show an acceleration in the adoption? Because it's a fairly conservative market. I'll just give 3 examples. One is the one that we just discussed, right? It's optimization of the grid infrastructure and pushing the boundaries of the grid capacity. So that's how I see it. Second, we haven't talked about it, but I think that was linked to the previous conference, which was as a consumer. Do we want more visibility? Do we want flexible tariff? Do we want to connect our assets ourselves? Do we want to manage them? So all utility 2 or 3.0 that we see, and going back to the prosumer cycles that we talked about, right? If you want to charge your electric car, for example. Those are 2 pain points. And the third one is the one that you just mentioned, which is bridging the 2 worlds that I just talked about. The grid and the DR. And we were looking a few weeks ago at the wholesale market in one particular state, was in New York State, because we have the data, right? It's not because we want to focus on the US state. And we saw that the wholesale market during the last 5 years were fairly flat in terms of volume. And then we look at the bilateral, basically like at the VPP volume, right? And it has been tripling in the last 7 years.
Yep.
So there is clearly something to do, but from a, not global, but at least from a multi-country perspective. I don't know who will be the winners. Will it be the aggregators that you mentioned earlier? Will it be marketplace for DSOs or large player like Enel? And I don't have shares of Enel, it's just an example. Or will it be independent players?
Right.
And we're looking at that with a lot of attention because we believe that will unlock a lot of solution or like unlock a lot of problems that we've seen on this flex market.
That's great. Oh, sorry.
Sure.
I was going to say, Patrick,
No.
your view
I wanted, I think, to double click on some of the things you said. I think point number 2 is of the utmost priority for everyone, is getting the consumer happy and putting it in front of electrification. I think one thing is if you historically look into any kind of B2C businesses that people have tried to sell energy app, energy subscription to end consumer, only a couple of these that have made through and are still existing. Because customer, I would say from the personas of home electrification is the most sensitive one, and the one that's like, I'm gonna go and electrify as long as it lowers my energy bill. As much as we wish it's all for the good sustainability, if that lowers the energy bill, I'm gonna do it. So I think proving that ROI and through all of these solutions that we put in front of the customer, doing that I think is very important. And I spoke with a couple utilities yesterday from Iberia, and this is a good task now. So you have all this flexibility coming into the market, you're working with DSO, you get these assets online. Before, the narrative was, how does the energy retailer take more margin or earn more money? Now the narrative is shifting. How do they give more to the end consumer so he doesn't flip or switch, to your point, challenger utilities or other customers? Because for utility, there's only 2 things. One is NPS, another is energy price. Other than that, it's a commodity.
Yes, it's a trend that we've seen in those new energy retailers to add stickiness through bringing either a marketplace solution where you can add some more intelligence, or also like the VPP. It's all about the stickiness, right? If you're an energy retailer. So like the level 1 or like the base of your buying and selling energy is not enough anymore.
Yep.
Yes, if you have a great app, if you have some dynamic traffic, oh, great, but you need more than that.
Yep. So it's a new differentiating point
Totally.
that you can offer consumers, which is a great thing when you're utility and you don't have a lot of differentiation levers.
Right.
And I think that even comes to our place where it's more B2B, where I believe everybody's talking about regulation and what that can do to our companies, that you have to adopt these kind of technologies. I think actually the pressure from politicians and ratepayers is the main driver for much of this, because in the US, as in Europe, rates are going up and it's just unacceptable. And they know that if they don't act, they will be acted upon, and they'd rather do something now and deal with it. And also, many of the regulatory models are based on the old school where you built yourself out of problems. So the way you make money is CapEx. So let's say you spend $100 million you make $10 million a year in your regulatory model. Now, if I come and tell you, I'll put this on your system and you don't have to invest $100 million, now you only have to invest 70.
Yep.
That wasn't a good business model for them, right? Then they're just making $7 million a year. However, right now, the problem is they have more projects than they will ever be able to build or fund or be able to get through regulations. So right now, they want to use this kind of technology to see where should we build. And I'll give you just one concrete example. One utility had a 20-mile line. They were going to reconductor that line. With these sensors, they could see that it was actually only half a mile that they had to reconductor. And this way save 19.5 miles and millions of dollars, right? So it's optimizing cash flows and bringing rates down. That is driving from the end consumer and selling and energy services to the high grid level and transmission.
So I want to bring...
If I may add one final point.
Go ahead, yes.
I would love to take some of these conversations that we're having as technology providers, for example, back into a national/state level. I think a lot of the impact that we can have is actually national. I think one example I can give is, for example, we work with TenneT in the Netherlands, my home country as well. Usually pretty proud of how we do things, but currently the network is extremely congested and a massive issue. And if you look at the issues that poses generally for the economy, right? Like BCG estimates that it's about 10 to 35 billion annually in damage of companies leaving the country because they can't get a connection because the grid is congested. So how do you overcome that, right? And how do you actually deploy technology on a national level? How do you incentivize that? How do you take it back to sort of that green component and look at your state goals from an energy transition perspective as well? I think we're looking far too often to just the B2B component, and I would love to get it uplifted to the governmental side of things, and I'm not sure how to get there just yet, but if anyone's listening, please get in touch.
Fantastic. I mean, obviously the big enablement here that's changed over the years is data, and it's a connection point, whether it's on the residential side, utility side. And I guess the question is, do we have the right data? Do we have enough high quality data to be able to make some decisions? And that may be why people are sensitive. And, you know, we may have data on one aspect, but maybe we've forgotten about, you know, the other aspect. You know, maybe there's a blocker on the physical side that we didn't even think about, that we come to. And I'm just curious, sort of a view from a data perspective. Taco, obviously you collect a huge amount of data. Do we have the right data? Do we have enough data? Do we still need to make some progress there?
Yeah, there's definitely gaps, and specifically in the quality of the data. I wouldn't say in the quantity of the data. There's enough data out there. How do you create the insights that you need from it? I think one of the benefits of a platform like ours is that we're data agnostic, right? So we can feed in what Heimdall produces into our model and then start, you know, doing simulations or reporting and modeling. We work with a lot of utilities who have 5, maybe 15 different systems across different operations, different teams. They're all collecting data that's hugely valuable, coming from the field, coming from the assets, coming from their operations, coming from their financing teams. But how do you bring that together to actually produce the insights? So I would say, yes, there is enough data. How do you bring it together in one relevant environment? And then when you start using your analytics and reporting to actually derive what you need to action and the insights that you create from that. And I think Heimdall would be a fantastic partner in, for example, with Neara, how do you actually use the data created in the fields with the sensors live into a model like ours? And then how do you actually action that, like right on the spot?
And therein is exactly, I think that was great. Heimdall would be so actually we don't have the right data, and we don't have enough data. Only less than 1% of overhead lines in the world have any sensors. We have no idea what's going on our overhead lines. There's a lot of other data. That data is low quality, and so what we find when we have our sensors and our data, pretty much any software company in this conference would say the same thing. Having your data would be fantastic to optimize our software, and that's, I think, where we see the value is lying. I don't know if we'll touch in on it, but we're seeing a lot on, you know, AI. The CEO of Microsoft said, you know, it's the end of SaaS or, you know, building software the way we do, and it's more AI agents, co-piloting based on databases. And so I agree. These two softwares and this universe goes very well hand in hand together. But we started from the other end, saying there is a lot of missing data and the quality is low, so let's start there and then build it into these kind of models and simulations, because without that, what we're seeing is all the simulation software that we've worked with to test. When the utility looks at it, sometimes they say, this isn't what we're seeing. And so having the actual flow on every power line anywhere in your grid and being able to see that what you're simulating is actually also what's happening to see that your model and your data is correct is I think, key to the future of this space.
Yep. Go ahead.
Yes. So just a comment on the data. In order to accelerate the renewable acceleration, which is the point of today, we see two topics about data. One is the one we talked about. Let's get more visibility for more data, or where's the DR are and where's the need of the DSOs. Come back to my previous point. But then there is a very big topic that we liked was on, like, as a consumer. So we look at energy retailers, the topic we are just talking about, and saying who owns the most data. There's so many players, right? Yep. There's installers of heat pump, right? There's energy retailers, you have software for solar panel installation, etc. Like, it's so broad. And we thought, who is owning the data? Who is owning continuously this relationship with the consumer? And we saw two of them. The energy, like, it's not installers, because it's a one shot with very high CAC, actually. So we didn't invest in that field. But we like the energy retailer, because you're the one who are in constant discussion with it, so you own the data. And second that we like was home renovation. Because home renovation, to use a bad word, they can build a digital twin of your house. And then they can own your renovation journey across the different steps, the electrification journey that you're having. So that's why we invested in those two fields for now in the consumer cycle, because you have the most data.
Maybe slight tangent, but interesting, I think, to note. Sorry for that. We actually did some polling recently where if the consumer understands why pylons are being built, and if it's for renewable energy, they're twice more likely to accept it within their direct environment or in their backyard, for example. So I think coming to that, it's not just data, it's also information and sharing that with the consumer. Why are you doing things? Because, for example, upgrading the grid as it currently stands, still one of the biggest blockers to renewable energy adoption, is actually building permissions, approvals from people that don't give access to their land, for example, or not having it in their backyard. So understanding that, it could take 10 to 15 years to build a new line just based on the permissions and approvals. Just keeping your consumers, your people generally informed and making sure that that data exchange goes both ways, I think, is hugely important.
And these are great comments of who owns ultimately the data, how are people using the data. We can't be on a panel talking about software without speaking about AI, but I'd say like AI or Gen AI, right? Because we have a lot of gaps. Can Gen AI help us out here? Curious your views.
We spend a lot of time, I mean, we talked about this.
Yeah,
you have AI,
actually,
we use AI, we both use AI. I mean, both from basic things as our programmers programming using AI, so we use these tools very actively internally. But looking more into the future, so obviously, when you're using ChatGPT and you're asking it to write you an intro or whatever, being fairly accurate is good, right? And it is fairly accurate. In the electric grid, you can't be fairly accurate. You have to be 100% every time. Like, you can never have the lights go up due to AI. So I think it'll be just like autonomous cars. We started without it. Then we have supported. You still have to sit in your seat and like be in control, but the car will do some moves, and then we will get comfortable with more and more automation. I think that's what we're building in, and thinking more about giving you a co-pilot. Like, when you come to work in our system, it'll be not just a static dashboard, which is how we have built industrial software, but it'll be, hey, Tom or Bob or whatever, this is what you need to think of today, and I would suggest this, and if you think about this. And that's combining all these data points, right? The ones that we have with weather forecast, demand, generation forecast, the grid capacity, all of this into one and suggesting things. And I think that's definitely going to happen, but it's going to be more as a co-pilot in the beginning. Then some of our system will run more automated. For example, when we have lines that are connected to wind farms, we could easily give the wind farm our projections on grid capacity for the next day. Yep. And the wind farm could operate together with some battery buffer, 1-to-1, and really utilize every single drop of capacity on the grid in the combination of flexible wind and batteries. And that could also be automated to a much bigger degree.
Fantastic. We have about 5 minutes left. I just want to check to see if there's any questions from the audience to get some questions. I can't see. No questions. Okay, I'll keep going. Please do shout if there are any questions out there. It's hard to see you. So let's just talk about the future now a little bit, where we're going. I think we've made incredible progress over the last years. Data's enabler, software's enabler, communicating, education. Maybe starting with Patrick, I'd love to go through the panel and say, in the next 5 to 10 years, where do you see the biggest opportunities to invest? Where's the biggest change? Where's the bottlenecks that are being unlocked? And we're going to see the growth.
I think if we look past 10, 15 years, a lot of the stuff has been around scaling up, de-risking, and putting utility scale renewables, solar, wind, and everyone saw their prices drop and accessibility, all that. I think where the trend is shifting now is there is battery energy storage that's suddenly being put both on utility scale to actually avoid some of the grid queues that you have right now. So you get kind of a priority because you have a balancing mechanism embedded into the solar plant that you build. But then also for C&I, the business case is very different. Again, I think the pricing on all of these cells and batteries went down. There's just so many markets that one can also tap into. I think there's a lot of opportunities around assessing that yield curve of the batteries. I think once you had solar, it's pretty simple. You punch in some numbers and you get an amazing graph, and then you take that to a bank and then you get banked. If you add up batteries, there's 10,000 different scenarios, 20,000 different scenarios, depending on which markets you're operating, depending which batteries you put and how you plan to put these batteries. So I think, honestly, there's going to be a lot of exciting stuff on the batteries. And I think to kind of finish it off, while people have building a lot of stuff in front of the meter, large batteries, and even C&I think the excitement is also around behind the meter. And I think a lot of the stuff, by putting batteries behind the meter and then having them work in a well manner, I think could solve a lot of the problems that we have on both generation as well as grid infrastructure.
Am I allowed to jump in and add? Yeah. I think batteries, fantastic technology, but there's no silver bullet, right? So I think it looks more towards consolidation of different solutions and technologies that over the cross 5 years that we're looking at now. I think how do you bring those together, right? How do we test it, trial it, show value? And then how do you bring that together? I think it's more about an ecosystem of options and technologies rather than just deploying battery and it will solve everything for you, right? It's flexibility, it's grid digitization and modeling, it's batteries, it's hydrogen, it's all of those technologies combined that I think will really start to see consolidate and come together very constructively over the next 5 to 10 years and really show value, I think.
It's exciting, right? Because it's increasing complexity to a very large degree. At the same time, that's why we've got these data models, we've got software, things that can deal with it. So this is a great opportunity.
And I think the complexity is the thing. And I think we have seen, utilities are slow to adopt, and that's because of the nature of their business, how they built, how grids are built, and the thing is, I don't think they have an option of buying your software or buying our sensors. I don't think that's an option anymore. I think they have to, because the complexity is just not going to allow them to. So everything that we're talking about with energy, none of that is going to happen without this. It's not possible. There is no scenario where you don't model it, where you don't have the data, and you don't combine all of it, because I totally agree, it's in the combination of all of this. And that is where the software and the AI and the modeling fits in, and that's why why hasn't it been adopted more before? Well, you didn't have to, right? You could do it the old way, right? You can still fly helicopters over and scan you don't need to use drones. It's more environmentally friendly. But you cannot do the energy future in the next 5 to 10 years without these kind of software. And that's what's driving the market and all of this interest in this space at this conference, I believe.
Yeah. Julien, one last comment.
Can go quick, yes. I think Gen AI, batteries are I would say like enablers. While I'll see the market, I'll see the utility world keeping improving through incremental innovation. I see the consumer, the energy retail world being disrupted with players which are more integrated. What you've seen in the UK, happening in many countries, owning the electrification journey through your solar panel, through your storage, your battery, your EV chargers, a dynamic tariff, being able to put some cap on your energy tariff if you want. Yeah.
Very good. Well, I want to thank our panelists today. They're obviously around at the conference, so please ask them questions. I'm very excited about the opportunity that's going to be created here going forward. So thank you again.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks.